On a busy day, a dog starts barking non-stop at the trunk of a car parked at the mall. When the car owner returns, he didn't want the police to see what was inside because the reason was shocking. Before we dive in, if you're an animal lover like us, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss any heartwarming stories. Thanks. Now, back to our story. The Saturday sun cast its golden light over the Springfield Mall, transforming the mirrored windows into a glittering mosaic. Families streamed in and out, laden with shopping bags, their smiles reflecting the joy of a perfect day for retail therapy. In the bustling parking lot, amidst a labyrinth of cars, an unusual duo conducted their routine patrol. Officer Jake Peterson and his canine partner, Thor, a majestic German shepherd with a striking sable coat. Jake adjusted his gear belt as he watched Thor methodically sniff between the vehicles. After 15 years on the force, the officer had learned to trust his four-legged partner's instincts implicitly. Thor wasn't just a police dog. He was a guardian with a sixth sense for situations that warranted special attention. The day unfolded uneventfully until near Section B of the parking lot, Thor exhibited a sudden change in behavior. His ears perked up, his muscular body tensed like a violin string, and his keen eyes locked onto a nondescript silver sedan. The barks that followed weren't the usual routine alerts. There was urgency in his call, an insistence that Jake immediately recognized as a sign that something was amiss. Approaching the vehicle, Jake noticed details that his experience flagged as concerning. Fresh scratches around the trunk lock, a subtle mark that might go unnoticed by a less trained eye. As he examined the car, a movement caught his attention. A man of about 60 approached hurriedly. His clothes, though clean, showed signs of wear, and his face displayed a pallor that contrasted with the agitation of his movements. "That's my car," he announced, his voice trembling with an anxiety that Jake immediately picked up on. Robert's hands trembled visibly as he searched for the registration in his worn wallet. Thor remained alert, his intelligent eyes darting between the man and the trunk of the car. Jake's gut, honed by years of experience, told him there was more to this situation than met the eye. "There's no need. I just came to do some shopping," Robert tried to argue, but his voice cracked on the last word, betraying his growing anxiety. The metallic click of the latch opening echoed like thunder in the silence that had formed. Jake wasn't prepared for the scene that unfolded. Huddled in the cramped space, a girl of approximately 9 years old looked up at them with wide, frightened eyes. The girl, whom Jake would soon learn was named Lily, remained still, her large brown eyes darting rapidly between the adults. Her fragile appearance and the deep circles under her eyes told a story that went far beyond that moment in the parking lot. Thor, surprisingly, showed no aggression. On the contrary, his behavior had shifted to a state of protective vigilance, as if he sensed that the situation was more complex than it initially appeared. Jake, following protocol, quickly called for backup over the radio, but something in the girl's eyes and Robert's defensive posture made him question his initial assumptions about the case. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tense air of the parking lot. Robert, tears in his eyes, remained near the car, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that seemed more desperate than guilty. Little Lily, still in the trunk, didn't exhibit the kind of fear that would be expected of a kidnapped child. There was something different in her gaze, a mixture of resignation and relief that intrigued Officer Jake. "Mr. Miller, I need you to step away from the vehicle," Jake instructed, maintaining a firm but non-threatening tone. Thor remained attentive, his behavior surprisingly calm for a situation that, on the surface, looked like a clear case of kidnapping. As the first patrol cars arrived on the scene, a social worker, Helen Moore, approached with gentle steps. Her 40 years of experience were reflected in the kind eyes behind her delicate framed glasses. With a discreet gesture, Jake allowed her to approach Lily. With Helen's help, Lily climbed out of the trunk. Her clothes, though simple, were clean, and a small backpack with unicorn designs hung from her shoulder. details that didn't align with a typical kidnapping. The girl moved instinctively closer to Robert, another behavior that contradicted the initial scenario. Before she could continue, a commotion drew everyone's attention. An elegant couple hurried across the parking lot. The woman, wearing a designer outfit and high heels, ran with a studied grace. The man, in a well-tailored suit, maintained an expression of concern that seemed rehearsed. "How could you, Robert?" The man, Mark Miller, pointed an accusing finger at his brother. "Have you completely lost it? Kidnapping your own niece?" Helen led Lily to her patrol car, equipped with a comfortable space for conversations with children. On the way, the girl held tightly to her backpack, as if carrying something precious. "Actually," Robert interrupted, his voice gaining strength, "you were at another one of your parties. Lily called me crying, saying she was hungry and alone. Again." As the argument unfolded, Helen made notes in her pad, her experienced gaze darting between the adults. Jake realized that the social worker was already forming her own conclusions. Jake nodded silently. Years of experience told him that they were facing something more complex than it appeared. The truth, he suspected, was hidden in the small contradictions, the furtive glances, and most importantly, in the behavior of little Lily. Inside the cozy interior of the adapted patrol car, Helen watched Lily fidgeting with the zipper of her unicorn backpack. The social worker had transformed the space into a safe environment, with strategically positioned teddy bears and a small drawing set on the folding table. "You know, sometimes it's easier to tell stories through drawings," Helen continued, noticing how Lily began to sketch a house. "Would you like to tell me about your drawing?" "It started about 2 years ago," Robert explained, his voice low but firm. "After Mark got that promotion at the bank, suddenly it was all about appearances, parties, social connections. Lily became increasingly invisible in her own home. In the makeshift room, Lily continued her drawing, now adding human figures. Helen noticed that the figure representing the girl was always distant from the parents, while an older figure, presumably Uncle Robert, appeared nearby, often holding what looked like a grocery bag. "Uncle Robert always brings food when the fridge is empty," Lily commented spontaneously, coloring the bag in the drawing. "He taught me how to make sandwiches and keep snacks in my room for when Mom and Dad go out at night." "Almost always," Lily replied, exchanging the blue pencil for a red one. "They say they're important appointments that I need to understand because I'm a big girl now." Her small voice carried a precocious maturity that made Helen make another note in her pad. Meanwhile, Patricia and Mark Miller spoke with another officer, their voices controlled but laden with indignation. "Robert has always been a troublemaker," Patricia insisted, nervously adjusting her designer blazer. "He's never accepted our success, our lifestyle. Now he's made up this absurd story of neglect to defame us." Thor, who had remained close to the patrol car where Lily was, pricked up his ears at a muffled sob. The girl had begun to cry silently while drawing what appeared to be an empty dinner table. Helen gently offered Lily a tissue, noting that the unicorn backpack was full of packages of cookies and granola bars. "Did you pack this backpack yourself?" Outside, Jake received the preliminary results of the background check. Robert Miller had no criminal record, just a few old traffic tickets. His file showed steady employment as a retired math teacher and a history of regular donations to charities focused on underprivileged children. "Officer," Helen called, emerging from the patrol car with her notepad. Her normally serene face was marked by professional concern. "We need to talk about the indicators of neglect I'm observing. The situation is more serious than it appears." Jake nodded, glancing at Thor, who maintained his protective vigil near Lily. The dog, with his instinctive wisdom, seemed to have realized from the beginning what the humans were only beginning to discover, that sometimes the real dangers hide behind perfectly polished facades, and that heroes don't always look like those in fairy tales. Helen shared her notes with Jake in a discreet conversation away from the gaze of the Miller family. The experienced officer frowned as he examined the details that the social worker had meticulously documented. patterns of behavior, signs of emotional neglect, and more disturbingly, indications of food deprivation. "We need a welfare check at the Miller's residence," Jake decided, his gaze meeting Helen's. "Something tells me we're going to find more evidence that corroborates Lily's account." Helen adjusted her glasses, a habit she'd developed over the years when she needed to maintain composure in the face of delicate situations. "Mrs. Miller, at this time, Lily will be placed in temporary protective custody of Child Protective Services while we conduct a more thorough investigation." "Mr. Miller," Jake interrupted politely, "your connections are not relevant to our investigation. Lily's well-being is our only concern at the moment." Robert, still under supervision in another patrol car, watched the scene with a mixture of concern and relief. When one of the officers offered him water, his hands trembled less as he accepted the cup. Years of silent anguish seemed to be finally finding an outlet. "Can I show you something?" he asked the officer supervising him, carefully removing a cell phone from his pocket. "I have records, photos, messages. I've been documenting everything for months, waiting for the right moment to act." On Robert's cell phone, a disturbing story began to unfold through images and text messages. Photos of the empty refrigerator in the Miller's house, taken discreetly during his visits. Late-night messages from Lily, asking for help because she was hungry or scared. Records of calls in the early hours of the morning when the parents went out to social events, leaving their daughter alone. "I tried to alert the authorities before," Robert explained, his voice laden with regret. "But Mark has influence. The reports were always dismissed before they were even properly investigated." Lily, inside the patrol car, had finished a series of drawings that told her story better than words could. Portraits of lonely dinners, of nights awake listening to parties downstairs, of moments of comfort when Uncle Robert appeared with bags of food and stories to tell. The girl's heartfelt plea struck Helen like an arrow straight to the heart. In her 40 years of social work, she had learned that children rarely lie about their deepest feelings. "We're going to need a warrant to search the residence," he commented to Helen, "and I suggest we initiate the process of evaluating Mr. Robert Miller as a potential temporary guardian." The Miller's mansion, with its imposing facade and meticulously manicured lawn, stood like a monument to prosperity in the city's upscale neighborhood. Jake, Helen, and a small investigation team arrived at the location late that afternoon, accompanied by Mark and Patricia, who maintained tense expressions behind rehearsed smiles. "As you can see, we provide the best for our Lily," Patricia declared, gesturing toward the 3-story house as she entered the security code. The alarm system emitted a soft beep, and the heavy, solid wood doors opened to an entrance hall decorated with expensive artwork. Helen observed every detail with experienced eyes, making discreet notes. The atmosphere, although luxurious, had an artificial quality, like a theater set prepared for a performance. The strategically positioned family photographs showed smiles that were too perfect, poses that seemed lifted from a catalog. "We'd like to see Lily's room," Jake requested, noting how Mark hesitated momentarily before leading them up the marble staircase. Thor, who accompanied them, remained alert, his muzzle raised as if he were picking up on something beyond the superficial appearances. Lily's room, located on the 2nd floor, was a living contradiction. The furniture was expensive and the wallpaper delicate, but there was a notable absence of personal elements. No toys out of place, no books open on the study table, no sign of the natural clutter of a space inhabited by a 9-year-old child. Helen opened the impeccably organized closet, finding dresses and outfits that seemed more appropriate for photo shoots than for the daily life of a girl. At the bottom of a drawer, hidden under folded clothes, a notebook caught her attention. In the sophisticated kitchen, with state-of-the-art appliances, the stainless steel refrigerator revealed practically empty shelves. A few bottles of mineral water, decorative fruits, and expired yogurts were the only occupants of the refrigerated space. Helen flipped through the notebook found in the room, discovering pages and pages of outpourings written in childish handwriting. Accounts of lonely nights, of loud parties downstairs, of ignored requests for food. Among the pages, receipts for snacks purchased by Robert and small notes of comfort written by him were carefully kept. "We found something interesting in the office," called one of the investigators. In the elegant room, a locked drawer revealed piles of unpaid medical bills, including invoices for therapy sessions for Lily that had never been performed. "We have a warrant, Mr. Miller," Jake reminded him calmly, "and every piece of evidence we find corroborates the accounts of your daughter and Mr. Robert." Thor, sniffing around the office, suddenly stopped in front of a panel in the wall. His alert barks drew Jake's attention, who discovered a hidden safe. After insistence from the authorities, Mark reluctantly opened it, revealing documents that suggested the couple was diverting money intended for Lily's care to maintain their lavish lifestyle. "We need to document all of this," Helen whispered to Jake, her professional voice barely able to conceal her indignation. "The situation is even worse than we imagined." The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the tall windows of the mansion. The golden light of dusk revealed dust particles dancing in the air, like long-hidden secrets finally coming to light. "You know, Lily," Helen began, tucking a strand of graying hair behind her ear, "we found your special notebook." She carefully observed the girl's reaction, who hugged the teddy bear borrowed from the center tighter. Helen smiled gently, noticing how the girl lit up when talking about her uncle. "You wrote a lot in it. It must have been important to have that space just for you." "This is my sister Clara," he explained, showing the image of a smiling young woman. "She went through something similar in our childhood. Our parents were like Mark and Patricia, more concerned with appearances than with feelings. Clara didn't survive the depression she developed. I promised myself I wouldn't let that happen to Lily." "I tried," Robert sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "I made anonymous reports, I talked to the school, but Mark always managed to stifle everything with his money and influence. When I saw Lily losing weight, having increasingly frequent anxiety attacks, I realized I needed to do something more drastic." In Helen's room, Lily had started drawing again. This time, her drawing showed a small figure sitting at a table with an older figure, both smiling over what appeared to be a plate of food. Helen made another note in her pad, recording how Lily's face lit up when talking about these moments. "And how do you feel when you're with your uncle?" In the hallway, Thor waited patiently beside the door, his ears attentive to every sound coming from inside the room. The police dog had developed a special bond with Lily, as if he recognized in her a gentle soul who needed protection. "Uncle Robert always left snacks in my locker at school," Lily continued, now drawing a small backpack full of hearts. "He said it was our special secret, so I'd never be hungry during class." The girl's eyes widened with hope. "Can I? He has a library full of interesting books and a small kitchen where he teaches me to bake cookies. And he has a garden where we can watch the birds." "I'm going to fight for her," Robert declared, his voice firm. "This time I won't let Mark's money and influence prevent Lily from receiving the love and care she deserves." The discovery happened by chance, as it often does in the most important cases. A cleaning lady at the bank where Mark worked found an envelope dropped behind a filing cabinet, one of those types of discoveries that only happen during deep cleans. The contents of the envelope, delivered to the authorities that morning, were about to change everything. "Officer Peterson," the police precinct receptionist called, handing the brown envelope to Jake. "Just arrived, marked as urgent in relation to the Miller case." At the shelter, Lily was having a peaceful morning with Robert, who had received permission for supervised visits. The two were sitting in a cozy corner of the library, with Thor lying lazily at their feet, while Robert read aloud from an adventure book. "Mr. Miller," she called softly, "could you come with me for a moment? Lily will be fine with our child psychologist, Dr. Marie." "What we've found," Jake began, "goes far beyond the neglect we had already documented." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Mark and Patricia Miller are not Lily's biological parents. Ms. Davis adjusted her glasses and began to explain. The documents indicate that Lily was illegally adopted as a baby. Mark and Patricia bought her through a sophisticated child trafficking scheme. They used their money and influence to forge documents and create a story of legal adoption. Helen, who had sat down next to Robert, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That explains a lot of their behavior," she commented. "The emotional bond never really existed. Lily was more of an accessory to their perfect social image." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Robert felt the air leave his lungs as if he'd been punched. "Clara," he repeated, his voice trembling, "but she died before—" Silent tears began to stream down Robert's face. Years of instinctive protection of Lily, that inexplicable connection he had always felt with his niece, now made devastating sense. She wasn't just his niece, she was his grandniece, the daughter of the sister he couldn't save. "We have evidence that they did," Jake replied. "We found records of regular payments to an intermediary who maintained the secret. When they discovered that you were Clara's uncle, they probably panicked." Robert remained seated in the meeting room for long minutes after the revelations, his hands holding an old photograph of Clara that he always carried in his wallet. Helen and Jake exchanged worried glances, respecting the silence laden with emotion that filled the room. Ms. Davis, with decades of experience in delicate cases, leaned forward in her chair. "We need to be very careful with this disclosure. I suggest we work with our team of psychologists to develop the best approach." "How dare you!" Patricia Miller's voice sounded hysterical. "You have no right to keep our daughter away from us." She and Mark had arrived at the center, accompanied by a stern-looking lawyer. Ellen, who had positioned herself strategically between the group and the hallway leading to the library where Lily was, examined the documents carefully. "This order was issued before the new evidence we discovered this morning," she observed calmly. Ms. Davis chose this moment to speak, her imposing presence momentarily silencing everyone present. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I suggest you accompany your lawyers to my office. We have serious matters to discuss regarding illegal adoption and child trafficking." Thor, who had followed Jake, remained in an alert position, his attentive eyes fixed on the Millers. The dog's instinct, which from the beginning had perceived something wrong with that family, once again proved accurate. The Millers' lawyer, realizing the gravity of the situation, visibly changed his posture. "My clients exercise their right to remain silent. We will cooperate fully with the investigations, but through the appropriate channels." While the tension unfolded in the hallway, in the library, Lily continued her session with Dr. Marie, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding just a few feet away. She had just drawn a new portrait, a girl holding hands with an older man, surrounded by books and flowers. Dr. Marie smiled gently, making her notes. The natural connection between Lily and Robert, which had always seemed extraordinarily strong, now had an explanation that transcended chance. Ellen approached him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We're going to do this the right way," she assured him. "Lily will have all the support and love she needs to process these changes in her life." In the child therapy room at the shelter, Dr. Marie had carefully prepared the environment for one of the most important conversations in Lily's life. Colorful pillows scattered on the floor created a welcoming atmosphere, and on the low table, an album of old photographs awaited the right moment to be opened. Robert sat nervously on one of the pillows, his hands clasped in his lap, betraying his anxiety. Helen and Dr. Marie had spent hours with him the day before, preparing him for this moment. Thor, sensitive as always to the emotional climate, had settled near the door like a silent guardian. When Lily entered the room, her eyes immediately lit up at the sight of Robert. "Uncle Robert!" she exclaimed, running to hug him. He received her with a tight embrace, taking a deep breath to control the emotion that threatened to overflow. Dr. Marie picked up the photograph album and placed it between them. "Lily, you must have realized that there's been a lot going on in the last few days, haven't you?" The girl nodded, her expression becoming more serious. "Today, your Uncle Robert wants to tell you about someone very special." Robert opened the album to the first page, where a photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, sitting on a garden swing. "This is Clara," he began, his voice soft. "My dear sister. She would have been your grandmother." "Yes, honey," Robert agreed, fighting back tears. "Clara was a wonderful person, full of love and dreams. He paused, searching for the right words. "She was your mother's mother." "No, honey," Helen replied gently, moving closer to the group. "They brought you into their lives when you were just a baby, but not in the right way." Lily absorbed every word, every image, with a touching intensity. "Is that why you've always taken such good care of me, Uncle Robert? Because you knew?" Thor, sensing the emotion in the air, approached silently and rested his head on Lily's lap, offering his own kind of comfort. The girl automatically began to stroke his ears, a gesture that seemed to soothe both her and the dog. Silent tears streamed down Lily's face as Robert placed the necklace around her neck. They weren't tears of sadness, but of understanding, of pieces fitting into a puzzle that she didn't even know existed. Dr. Marie exchanged a meaningful look with Helen. The bond between uncle and niece, already strong before, now strengthened even further with the weight of the truth and the tie of blood finally revealed. Robert's house, a modest construction in a quiet neighborhood, underwent a subtle transformation in the weeks that followed. The guest room, once a neutral environment filled with stacked books, now displayed freshly painted walls in a soft shade of lavender, floral curtains, and an antique desk that Robert had restored especially for Lily. "What do you think of this one?" Robert asked, holding up a crescent moon-shaped lamp. They were at the local home decor store, choosing the finishing touches for the room. Temporary custody had been granted to Robert under regular supervision from social services. Helen, who accompanied them that afternoon as part of the supervision visits, observed the interaction with professional satisfaction. In her notes, she recorded how the girl visibly flourished under the care of her great-uncle. "I think we can make that soup you like today," he suggested as they selected fresh vegetables. "How about we invite Helen for dinner with us?" In Robert's kitchen, father and daughter, as they had naturally become, regardless of the technical ties of great-uncle and grand-niece, worked in sync. Lily had her own apron decorated with kitten prints and a safe step stool that allowed her to reach the counter. Robert smiled, the question touching sweet memories. Yes, she loved it. In fact, this soup recipe was one of her favorites. She always said that good food needs two special ingredients: love and stories. "Did you know we found more photographs of your grandmother?" Robert commented, stirring the soup on the stove. "There are some of her at the botanical garden where she worked as a guide. She knew the name of every flower and loved to tell the stories behind them." Meanwhile, in the district attorney's office, Miss Davis reviewed the latest updates on the Miller case. The investigations had revealed a complex network of illegal adoptions, and Mark and Patricia faced serious charges. Their bank accounts were frozen, and their social influence was rapidly deteriorating. Back at Robert's house, dinner proceeded in a welcoming atmosphere. Lily excitedly recounted her new project at school, a presentation about the solar system inspired by her new moon-shaped lamp. Helen made another mental note, impressed with how Lily was beginning to process and verbalize her past experiences. In the living room, above the fireplace, a new photograph had joined the collection of family memories, Lily and Robert on the day of the official move, both smiling at the camera, Thor sitting faithfully beside them, all three radiating the sincere joy of a new beginning. One autumn morning brought with it the first real challenge since Lily had moved into Robert's house. The girl woke up screaming, haunted by nightmares that mixed memories of lonely nights in the miller's mansion with undefined fears of abandonment. But it wasn't just a dream, and both knew it. It was the past coming back to haunt her, the emotional wounds that needed time to heal. Dr. Marie had warned about this in their sessions, that there would be moments of relapse, difficult days amidst the progress. Robert sat closer, allowing her to nestle into his arms. "That's not going to happen, honey. We're safe now, together. Want me to tell you a story about your grandmother, Clara?" Lily nodded, still trembling slightly. Robert adjusted himself on the bed, his back supported by the headboard, and began to narrate. "When we were kids, Clara also had nightmares. You know what she used to do? She would make up stories about the stars. She said that every star in the sky was a guiding light, protecting everyone who needed to find their way home." As he spoke, Robert gently led Lily to the bedroom window. Together they observed the still, dark dawn sky, punctuated by a few stubborn stars that resisted the sunrise. That same morning, during the regular session with Dr. Marie, Lily worked on a new drawing. Unlike the previous ones, full of bright and cheerful colors, this one showed shadows and fears, but also points of light, stars scattered across the dark paper. Dr. Marie observed as Lily added a protective figure to the drawing, Robert depicted as a guardian between her and the shadows. "It's normal to be scared, Lily. The important thing is to know that we can talk about our fears and get help." "They're moonflowers," Lily explained excitedly, her hands dirty with soil, demonstrating that the fear of the morning had given way to a therapeutic activity. "Uncle Robert said they were Grandma Clara's favorites because they shine in the dark, like stars in the garden." "Yes," Lily replied with renewed enthusiasm. "We're going to make a whole flower bed, and when they grow, I'll be able to see their lights from my window, so I'll never feel alone in the dark again. We're also thinking about adopting a kitten," he commented to Helen. Dr. Marie suggested that a pet can be therapeutic, and Lily always wanted to have one, something that was never allowed in the Miller's house. Lily laughed, a crystalline sound that warmed the hearts of all who heard it. "Thor is our special friend. He was the first to discover that I needed help, remember?" "Are you sure you want to go, kiddo?" he asked gently, observing the determination on the girl's face. "Dr. Marie said you don't have to testify if you don't want to." Helen, who had arrived to accompany them, watched the interaction with admiration. In her 40 years of social work, she had rarely witnessed such strength in someone so young. Mark and Patricia Miller entered under escort, their expensive clothes failing to mask the weight of the charges they faced. Patricia tried to smile at Lily, but the girl instinctively moved closer to Robert, Thor positioning himself protectively by her side. District Attorney Davis presented the evidence methodically. Fraudulent adoption documents, records of illicit payments, proof of ongoing neglect. But it was Lily's recorded testimony, played on video to avoid a direct confrontation, that silenced the room. Patricia began to cry, but her tears seemed more of self-pity than of remorse. Mark remained rigid in his chair, his face a mask of indifference that was beginning to crack. Robert felt his eyes welling up. "Yes, honey, I'm sure she is." Lily didn't hesitate. "With Uncle Robert, he taught me that family isn't just who looks pretty in the pictures, but who really takes care of us, who makes us feel loved even when we're sad or scared." At the moment of the verdict, Patricia finally broke her facade of composure. "You can't do this," she screamed, rising abruptly. "We spent so much money. We gave her everything." "Uncle Robert," she called softly, "can we stop by the botanical garden on the way home? I want to leave some flowers for Grandma Clara." Thor, still by their side, wagged his tail as if approving the plan. The dog who had started that entire journey continued to be a constant and protective presence in their lives. "Look, Dad," Lily called excitedly from her bedroom window, the word Dad flowing naturally from her lips in recent times. "The stars in the garden are shining." On the windowsill, a tabby cat named Galileo, chosen by Lily at the local shelter for having eyes that looked like stars, stretched lazily. The addition of the feline to the family had been another step in building their home. Robert smiled, proud of the progress that his daughter had made. The nightmares had become rare, and when they occurred, Lily knew how to handle them. Counting stars by the window, hugging Galileo, or simply calling for him, sure that she was no longer alone. "This is my family treasure," she explained to the therapist, showing a page where a photo of young Clara was next to a recent photo of her with Robert at the botanical garden. "Grandma Clara helped us find each other, even though she's not here." "Sometimes I get sad thinking about Grandma Clara," Lily replied honestly. "But Uncle Robert, now I call him Dad." She smiled shyly. "He helps me remember that she's always with us, in the stars, in the flowers, and in the love that she left for us." "Guess what?" Lily exclaimed as soon as she saw Helen. "I was chosen to present a special project at school. I'm going to talk about different kinds of families and how love is what really matters. And Officer Peterson is coming on Sunday with Thor," Robert added, helping Lily measure the flower. "We're having a picnic in the garden to celebrate his graduation as an emotional support dog instructor. Next week we're also going to the botanical garden," Lily recounted while mixing the cake batter. "I'm going to help with the children's guided tours, telling them about the moonflowers and other plants that Grandma Clara loved." "You know what I like best about this house?" Lily commented while putting the cake in the oven. "That here I can be myself. I can laugh out loud, make a mess in the kitchen, cry when I'm sad, and I know I'm loved just the same." A year had passed since that fateful afternoon in the mall parking lot. The backyard garden of Robert and Lily's house was especially decorated for a special celebration. Delicate lights hung between the trees, tables with white tablecloths displayed homemade treats, and the moonflowers glowed softly in the early twilight. It was the day of Lily's official adoption party. Although the papers had already been signed for months, they had decided to wait for spring to celebrate, when the garden would be most beautiful. A silent tribute to Clara's memory. "More than perfect," Robert assured her, watching with pride how his daughter had arranged every detail of the party with such care. At the center of the main table, a new photograph album waited to receive the memories of that special night. Galileo, the family cat, observed everything from his privileged post on the windowsill, occasionally exchanging knowing glances with Thor, an unlikely friendship that had developed over the months. Dr. Marie observed the interaction with professional and personal satisfaction. The gift she brought was a new diary, knowing that Lily had developed the habit of writing about her feelings, now no longer out of therapeutic necessity, but for creative pleasure. "Today," Robert began, his voice choked with emotion, "we're not just celebrating a legal document, we're celebrating how love can find us in the most unexpected moments, how family is something we build with care, patience, and understanding." Lily, holding her dad's hand, continued, "And we're also thanking everyone who helped us on this journey, to Grandma Clara, who guided us like a star in the sky, to Thor, who was the first to realize that I needed help, to Helen, who believed in us, to Dr. Marie, who helped me find my voice." "Oh, where do the lanterns go, Dad?" asked one of the children present, the daughter of a neighbor. "Dad," Lily called softly, "do you think Grandma Clara is proud of us?" In the new album on the table, the first photograph of the night showed father and daughter smiling, surrounded by glowing moonflowers, with Thor and Galileo completing the family portrait. Below the photo, Lily had written in her careful handwriting, "Because family is where love finds its way home."